was the crime of the century, a horrifying and gruesome double murder that, after more than 100 years, is still unsolved.
Mr. Borden and his wife were brutally hatcheted to death early in the morning.
These two victims were butchered.
Join us at the house where it all happened. One of the most haunted locations in the world.
There's a residual energy that's here.
Footsteps, people talking, doors slamming.
A lot of people see the toys being moved around.
There's a man there, and I don't know who he is.
It is about the right size for most of the wounds on the Borden skulls.
Our experts will break down the murders and the trial. They'll discuss alternate theories and potentially overlooked suspects.
Uncle John's alibi doesn't hold water.
Join host Susan Slaughter and your favorite paranormal researchers as they search for answers to the crime and the haunting. Will the ghost of the house offer any clues? Will Lizzie herself make contact? Find out as the Dark Zone brings you the Lizzie Borden Murder House.
I'm Jay Blumke. I'll be your host on this end. Let's go to Fall River, Massachusetts and say hi to our other host, Susan Slaughter. Hello,
Hi.
Susan. We've got something really cool coming up. I'm excited about it. Susan, I know we've discussed this. I know you're looking forward to seeing what's going on here. It's one of those things where I don't think that anything like this has ever been done. The Dark Zone is once again bringing you a first in terms of these kinds of digital paranormal conventions. I've got a really cool clip I want to show you, and this will set the stage for what is about to happen next.
In 1970, the CIA began a top-secret program on psychotronic research. This project would become known as Project Stargate, and remote viewing was a primary focus. The goal was to train American soldiers to use their minds to foresee, prevent, and even counter an attack by a foreign adversary, principally the Soviet Union. Remote viewers were trained to gather impressions, clues, images, and other information about an unseen, unknown target. It is said that they are able to identify targets backwards and forwards in time, and even throughout the universe. The Dark Zone asked remote viewing expert Lori Lambert-Williams to take a look at the double murders of Andrew and Abby Borden. She assigned the blind target coordinate to 10 professional remote viewers who each individually, over the last month, looked into the infamous unsolved case.
I'm drawing a picture of what this person that's responsible for these deaths look like.
Now, she will reveal the confidential results of their work.
Lori Lambert-Williams is our next guest, so let's welcome her on board. Hello, Lori. How are you?
Hello. Great.
Hi, Lori.
I'd like to talk about, remote viewing. I'd like you to tell us and establish with the audience what it is, and it would be great to talk a little bit about the program and how you were trained and everything, and then we want to know about what the experiment is that you got set up.
I met one of the foremost trainers who had been a trainer in the secret military program, Lynn Buchanan, in 1996. I had the good fortune of meeting Lynn, and he and his wife sort of took me under their wing and started teaching me. Lynn started teaching me. His wife's not a remote viewer, but as I started studying with Lynn, I was so flabbergasted by the results that we were able to get. When you just assign a blind target to someone, they have no idea what it is, and suddenly people are getting really accurate results.
You had 10 remote viewers. You tasked them with this case, with the Lizzie Borden double homicide.
Yes.
They did not know what they were viewing, though. They did not know what they were looking at.
I
Susan,
have a question, though, before we go in.
So when you're setting up your blind target, essentially you said an event. So are these remote viewers tapping into your consciousness to get this information, because you haven't given them necessarily a location or anything like that? Are you thinking in your mind's eye, Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast? Are you thinking like this event took place and you're holding it within you so that they tap into your consciousness to understand, to start picking at information?
That is an excellent question, and you would make a really good remote viewer, I can already tell. The reason your question is so good is because pollution is a real problem, or can be a potential problem with remote viewing, and especially if you're dealing with a lot of skeptics. It's like, well, wait a minute, was this done with experimental purity and all that sort of thing? So one of the things that I try to do whenever I'm managing a project is I try to know as little about it as possible. So I deliberately didn't watch any of the program. I deliberately didn't go online and look up stuff about Lizzie Borden. And that way it really helps to keep things pretty clean. So these 10 viewers all have many years of experience. And what we did was first I had to go out to a big group of viewers and say, I have a potential case that we would like to work on. Does anybody want to work on it? Does anybody have time? Because everybody has jobs and families and things. And then I ended up with 10 people who said, yes, I have the time. I'd like to do it. Now, with my viewers, for psychological reasons, if we're going to do anything that has to do with death or violence or things like that, I like to give them a heads up, because that way, if you have a really sensitive viewer that can maybe view lots of different types of targets but doesn't do well with death and violence, they can opt out. I think that's an important thing for people to have that choice. So I did tell them this target will involve death. So if you don't want to do it, let me know now. And so, like I said, I ended up with 10 viewers who were game to do it and wanted to do it. So as we got started, I told them just, give me a session that doesn't take a lot of time. So for your viewers who don't know, the people who are watching this who don't know a lot about remote viewing, what this particular process is called controlled remote viewing. And the idea is that you're going to control yourself. Many of us have little flashes of intuition from time to time where you know who's calling on the phone, or you have a precognitive dream that tells you something that's going to happen tomorrow. But what if you could control those things? What if you were able to control the level of intuition that you have and turn it on and use it on demand? How would that affect your life, your relationships, your finances, all those different things? So what we do when we're training a remote viewer is we help them first to get over the noun habit, the labels that we put on everything. And then we also teach them how to open the door to the subconscious mind. So you have to accept right off the bat that the subconscious mind is connected to everything that ever is, ever was, ever will be. It's like connected to the great big cosmic database in the sky. So if you think about that and you tap into that subconscious, then you can essentially get any answer that you need. But the problem is that the conscious and subconscious minds don't really communicate with each other. And the link is the human body. So we're going to start with the human body and allow our body to give us information. Our bodies are often the first warning signs that we get, feelings in our bodies. So we teach them a thing we call ideograms, which is kind of a symbolic language that goes through the body and provides an overall idea about a target. So we start new viewers with 7 basic concepts that are land, water, man-made, space, air, natural, biological, and motion energy. Those 7 basic things. And so they learn this language. That's the first thing we do to open the door between conscious and subconscious mind, is learning this physical language that's a lot like the old days of shorthand. If you remember shorthand, just squiggles. Once you have the ideogrammic language down, then you can start moving to the information that you got in that first little opening the little opening that you did when you started your sessions. So in this case, these viewers were actually able to tap into the fact that there were 2 people murdered and who was involved and who perpetrated the murder, and then actually look at the location of the murder and look at the motives that were involved in the murder.
So I have a comment on that. It's kind of like opening up like within your mind's eye in a psychic level, like a psychic Matryoshka doll, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like you open up one, and then you keep going in and in and in and in till you get down to the little guy in the middle.
Oh my God, you guys are killing me. I want results.
Okay, let's hear them.
Tell me what happened.
Okay, so what happened? First of all, one thing that really amazed me as I was looking through the results is that so many of the viewers, not 100% of them, but many of the viewers said that this was a murder where a man and a woman were murdered. Some of the viewers completely described the murder very, very closely, and the murder scene totally, describing that one person was murdered downstairs on a couch, one person was murdered upstairs in a bedroom. And then another thing that really amazed me is so many of the viewers said that 2 people committed the murders, a man and a woman.
Oh my God, that is huge. Right?
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
that is, you've got 10 remote viewers who don't know what they're looking at, who are not connected to each other. You gave them a blind target, and they picked up on the double homicide that is the Lizzie Borden story.
Yes.
That blows my mind right there.
So the majority of viewers described the murders as being committed by 2 people, a male and a female. Now, what really surprised me was that a number of the viewers described the male as being almost subservient, a little bit subservient to the female, feeling affection and loyalty to the female, and described as being rather poorly dressed. There's a male that's a slender build with a lanky gait, casual dresser, wearing a white shirt without buttons, beige pants, and light-colored soft shoes. He has light brown hair that is cut short and over his ears. He is between 30 and 40 years in age. He has small facial features. His eyes were described as being kind of small and slit-like, like slitty eyes. Small, thin eyebrows, long, thin nose, and his ears are long, and he has kind of pouty lips. He has a long, thin neck. His Adam's apple is noticeable. He doesn't wear jewelry. He doesn't have dark hair in his arms. He's not happy looking. The sketch that this viewer did, actually the face looked a lot like a photograph of Lizzie Borden, and I put them side by side in the report that I wrote up. And because the pouty lips and her nose isn't really sharp, but she does have kind of thin eyebrows. And so the sketch that the viewer sketched looked amazingly facially like Lizzie. So I didn't know if this particular viewer was confusing male and female maybe and actually describing Lizzie. Because when you think about it, mentally, it's like a big soup of information, and you're diving in and you're trying to make sense of this soup, kind of like taking a drink from a fire hose.
So your remote viewers picked up on the crime and described the crime. Now they're describing a suspect. And this suspect that is being described by, I don't know how many of your remote viewers, but a lot of them, because I did see the report. The suspect is being described as a man who is lanky, thin in build. He's got narrow features, and he seems to be subservient to the female, even maybe of lesser social status. Mm-hmm. Because of the way he's dressed.
We had several who described the guy as being kind of subservient, almost like he was like a helping hand. But if you want a really big bombshell, one of the things that blew my mind, I thought it was really interesting because this viewer's description of Lizzie Borden is, this is a woman in her early 30s with light brown curly hair who feels confused and neglected. She wants to teach someone a lesson. She waited till it was quiet and there was no one around, and this action was not planned ahead of time. This action was out of character for her, and she became angry and flipped out. And the victims died from blunt force trauma to the head and the back of the neck. The victim was smashed, slumped over, kneeled down, and slumped over on the floor. Okay, so viewer 135 describing a male that is demure, feisty, angered, a pounding expression, reddish-brown hair, flashing anger in the eyes, who's acrimonious, confrontational, and in some respects rather bitchy, which I thought was funny. Since he's describing a male, he describes the male as bitchy. A very determined personality. Has an image on his chest that's flowing in the usual position of a tie that looks streaked or stranded, possibly wet. Large boot-like shoes, stocky build. Several of the viewers describe this person as having a stocky build, not being extremely tall. And most people would not want to be friends with this person. Always watching his environment carefully, holding something in his hand that is hard and heavy. That's another thing about this, J2, that it seemed like every single viewer described the hatchet really thoroughly and very well.
Wow. Okay.
As the murder weapon. You know, just saying that there was something cylindrical and something metallic that was wider on one end and sharper on the other, and all these different descriptions. One of our mantras in remote viewing, our main mantra, is describe, don't identify. So they are encouraged to leave out naming words and leave out nouns. Which is really different from when you're trained in psychic stuff, where you're the more you name, the more accurate you are, the better you are if you can name something. But remote viewers are trained to not name things, but rather to describe them. So this person, this male person, wavers in different directions, is kind of bipolar, craving, has necessities. He got rode on and then pushed through. And then the word excelente came up. So since you were talking about Portuguese, Susan, I was like, interesting. Delicious as favorite expressions on labels and things. This is a motivated person, a fault-finding, capricious, animated, reactive, and then has bad crashes. Bulbous nose, prominent left ear, strong physique, but not a muscle builder, approximately 32 years old, non-sectarian, makes adamant choices. Weight at the time of the event was between 170 and 192 pounds. Later in life, gained weight. This person is mercurial in some aspects, which is not evident, as he is mostly stable and observant, but he can be touched off easily and doesn't like to be slighted, either perceived or real in any possible way. It makes him furious. But depending on the situation, and particularly if others are present, he modulates his reactions. His ethnicity is Middle European. Now, where's Portugal? Geographically.
Yeah, it's like on the coast near France. It's in Europe.
Right. So
it's on the coast. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it says there was a hidden agenda that led the whole event and gave little truth, resulting in manipulation of the crowd. Moving to a description of the person that killed the other two people, I felt a male presence, black, shadowy, panther-like person moving around the location. A slender person filled with anger and rage. I felt like this person could see through mirrors, image of sanding off the back of a mirror and peeking through it. A red bandana or scarf is the giveaway identifier of this person. I sensed a physical description of the killer as having blue or green eyes, blonde hair, crooked teeth, white with a medium build. And then it says her face was round. So first, the description of the killer is listed as male, a male presence, and then a female presence. Crooked teeth, face was round, rosy, with a light complexion, full lips, but did not use lipstick. She walks smoothly with a slender gait and is physically fit and well proportioned. I keep seeing rose red and lights as important of her description. She wears black and can be shadowy and sometimes utilizes a disguise. She can also look very well kept and proper. She's a younger person that's upset at the world and has ideals that she wants to live by. And she likes tobacco. I sense that the killer was linked to the two victims, and I had a close bond with them. Motive for the crime. Now, this is still the same viewer saying, the target felt hurt, pain, and revenge. So in other words, when he says target, he's talking about the actual target of Lizzie Borden murders. He's saying, so there was a lot of hurt, pain, and revenge. and that these feelings were the motive for the killing. That the murderer, the female murderer, felt limited in society for not getting her fair share of wealth. She wanted everything for herself, the house, the land, and the car. Again, not knowing what time frame we're talking about. I don't know, she wanted whatever the vehicle was. She felt robbed of her wealth.
Could be the buggy or the horse.
The buggy or the horse. It says she felt robbed of her wealth and education. Moving to the source of the hurt, pain, and revenge, I felt that there was power, leadership, and bondage around them. Ropes and rings that were used to tie up the killer. Abuse. The killer felt the victims were not normal, stern, strict, abusive. Acts that were hidden below the surface. This is really important. This is a big one coming up. The foul smell of tobacco smoke was on the killer's neck, and I felt as though the killer had been abused in a basement, and that the killings were transformational, that it helped the killer climb out of the basement and end her walk of darkness. I also felt like the killer was repeatedly groped, held in bear hugs, and that she fought these advances off by swinging her arms and legs and body back and forth, a twisting motion. She had fighting energy against sexual advances. Wrong, wrong, wrong. She had no help and no mom. The advances by the victim against the killer felt dark, old, and binding. There was love that was transformed into pain. Truth was hidden and resulted in sleepless nights and worried days. Sadistic acts by another, slapping and tapping. You will do what I say, you will obey. There's extreme anger at a male who was white-faced, smells bad, was creepy, lurks, and tells others to shush and be quiet. One other viewer, who actually has a background in forensics, also perceived that one of the main motives was revenge for sexual molestation. Another viewer pointed out that there was a male helper helping and assisting a female with the murders because of a great loyalty to the female and wanting to get revenge for pain that had been perpetrated against the female.
This is actually a huge kind of revelation, because so many people have heard the hints of sexual abuse as a potential motive for the crime, for the murders, not that this is documented or that this is written anywhere, but the fact that your remote viewers keyed in on this, this is something that a lot of people have suspected.
So I wanted to point out a few things, because I don't know, since you said you haven't been watching, trying to keep neutral in this situation, but there has been reports, and you're saying that it was hard for people to identify, they would say that she was female, but then they would describe her as male, and they didn't really know. But we had on a psychic, Sam Beltrusis, last night, and he had mentioned how the maid, Bridget, would hate that people would call her masculine, and that she looked like a man. And a lot of her features, I think that drawing to me looks a little bit more Bridget-like and less Lizzie-like. And then you're saying that also, that the other male that had in, that you had remote viewers saying that, his socioeconomic class was a little bit on the lower level. And, they described him as having maybe red hair or blonde hair. Now, we all know that, Bridget was Irish, and that, there's a huge Irish population out here, and usually the Irish class people were lower class people, and so it just makes sense that maybe this was somebody that was friends with maybe Bridget, another person that worked in a lower class field, maybe someone, Irish in identity with the red or blonde hair, the green eyes, like you were saying, the stocky build. This just sounds like someone to me that's like a working class man that, if you were like a maid running errands, and, they have their own kind of social lives and they'll hang out with people within their social status, that maybe she had confided in him, about the abuse that she was receiving, because other psychics had said that Bridget was constantly being, sexually abused, and they're putting locations like the sexual abuse would happen in places like the basement, and now the basement was a place where they had, the latrine or the toilets, the washing area, which was probably a place that Bridget spent a lot of time in working and doing her housekeeping. So to me, I think that this kind of points the finger a little bit more towards Bridget and maybe an accomplice that was another working class man that, sympathized with her and maybe wanted to get her out of a hard situation.
Now, I inserted the photograph there. This viewer did the three sketches. And there's two more below that one. If you okay,
look, I see Bridget. I'm sorry, but I see Bridget in all of these pictures. If you look at the photograph in her bedroom, that square jawline is 100% Bridget.
Oh, there it is. Oh, yeah, that does look like that sketch, doesn't it? Okay, so viewer 135, the murderer was male, Caucasian, stocky. Hazel or gray eyes, spiky light-colored hair. Clothing was formal, like a business suit, or tailored jeans with button-down shirt. Was a friend of a friend who was thrown together with the victim. Tense emotions escalated out of control. There was interference from 5 others who were younger, frustrated, and dangerous. The murder weapon was pointed, silvery, antique-looking. That's kind of interesting, antique-looking.
Yeah.
Where did I? Had something to do with the word deer or deer, meaning deer the animal or deer like, it's all right, dear. A twisted metallic object, silvery and black, hidden inside a rusty rectangular hinge container that was buried in a pit. Things are not what they seem at first. The person who caused the death was a friend of a friend, thrown together with the victim. Things went wrong, pushing, shoving, choking, action, reaction, went too far, but no turning back. Emotions tense, angry, frustrated, out of control, unexpected consequences, remorse. There was interference from uninvited others who were younger, dangerous, stealthy, faster. Others were around but not near. So that's kind of interesting. The person who caused the murder was male, Caucasian, stocky and stodgy. Now this person says that it was more a taller person, like from over 6 feet tall.
Well,
wing.
Let me ask you about that last comment that they were around but not near. Is the suggestion that there were other collaborators that, like for example, Emma, the sister is talked about a lot, but she was not there, right? She had an alibi. She was away visiting friends, but she also became Lizzie's, principal kind of defendant in the trial.
Oh, really? Okay, so I don't know. And also, we don't know if when it's saying close but not near, do we mean close emotionally? Like, were the sisters close at that time? Did they have a close relationship? Or do we mean close in proximity? So I don't know.
I feel like it's a close in proximity thing because everybody was around the house. I mean, the maid was cleaning windows. Abby was just in the barnyard behind, making tackle for, fishing. So they're all within the vicinity of the crime. So it makes sense,
My takeaway is kind of like that there were others involved in this crime, but they were not right directly there. They were maybe part of the planning stages, and then they were away from the actual location.
Yeah.
But that's how I read it.
Yeah. And that's the thing, too, is that normally when I run a project, I try not to put too much of my own interpretation on what the viewer's saying, but instead just share it to the people who do know, which is in this case you guys. You guys have a lot more knowledge about this than I do. So we just share the information and leave the interpretation up to you. And to the viewers who are watching. I don't mean remote viewers. I mean your viewers who are watching.
Yep.
Yeah,
they're also remote in a way.
They are remote viewers.
We're all remote.
They're viewers who are remote for sure. Now we have another viewer. She's starting to describe a dangerous male person who has dark hair and eyes. The eyes look spiny, hard, and small. So this is a second viewer who describes the murderer as male with kind of slitty, spiny, small, hard eyes. The female has dark hair, brown, long or mid-length by the shoulder blades, stringy and shiny. She has a bewildered sense of being. She feels like she shouldn't be there, but she follows the male and she knows what will occur. Several viewers kind of made it sound like there was a motive for inheritance, a house. There several viewers mentioned that, especially money in a house. And then what's interesting is because she's a psychic medium, she picks up on names. She picked up on the name John, picked up on the name Edward, and then a hard, sick mentally charmer who is 6 feet in height with a lanky build, affluent, no conscience with evil tendencies, is fearless unless his family's touched, economically motivated with a political agenda. And then a scared person who is young, under 7, running in motion, crying and can't breathe. I don't know who that would be because there were no children there, right? That we know of.
She might be picking up on activities that happened on the property prior to this murder, years prior.
Oh, okay.
Or could that be picking up on an abused person who's kind of like childlike inside, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Or
picking up on abuse that happened during childhood that stemmed out throughout the lifespan of this adult.
Yeah,
Right.
we don't really know. Okay, then. It sounded as if there was a meal happening prior to, and that there was some laughter and some talking going on at a meal. And then this is a specific description of the murderer, or one of the murderers. It says male, tall, 5'10" to 6 feet, money motivated, dark eyes, tan, with wrists that are lanky, arms, strong hands, fearless, wears baggy pants with pockets that are dark in color. Everybody describes baggy pants. I guess were baggy pants in style then, because everybody describes their pants as being baggy. Wears a white navy shirt with an oval face, looks worn and weathered, has crow's feet and veins in his eyes, clean shaven, cheekbones stick out, 175 pounds, age range 48 to 55. But now this is interesting. The person responsible for the deaths isn't the one who killed the individuals. Person is affluent, throws soirees, deceased male, not identified through conventional ways, opulence present, small plain yellow gold cross necklace. And that could also be symbolic, a cross necklace, because, it could be symbolic of a person who has a religious background. It's hard to say. And then the murder weapon was a hard object that is tubular and smooth, has a conical aspect, handheld, blunt force used, kicking motion present. Now this was really interesting.
Wow.
The outdoor land feels moist and dewy, but the way that dewy was spelled was Dewey. Was that how the judge that you mentioned right before I started, Susan? Is that how the name was spelled?
Yeah. J.J. Dewey was one of the judges. Yeah.
So
hey guys, we're actually running low on time.
Okay.
Are there some things that you definitely need to hit, before we kind of talk about what we're left with here?
Yeah, I think that the main thing to point out, time-wise, with the time running out, is that a lot of viewers got that there were a male and female involved in the murders, and that the female had been sexually abused, that the male who was assisting the female, a couple of viewers described him as being dominant and her as being subservient, but not really subservient, but being more willing to do what he told her to do. And others described him as a helper and being kind of in a subservient or almost like an employee type lineup, So I kind of got the impression, if I were to take a consensus from all the viewers, I got the impression that she definitely did not act by herself, that there were a male and female, whether it was Lizzie was a female or whether one of the maids was one of the killers. I'm not sure, but it does seem as though there was a male and a female involved, and that the female's main motive and also the male's main motive was because the female had been abused in some way. And so this was revenge. And that there was also a motive that was, most of the viewers said, that involved money, payment, and one viewer even mentioned an inheritance involving a house and money.
I'm hearing connections to, obviously, when you look at the man, right, I'm hearing a connection to potentially, of course, Uncle John Morse, who is not necessarily an employee, but is in business with Andrew Borden, and I think his business depends on Andrew's business. And if he was in cahoots with Lizzie. But there's another thing that is, I think, that this could point to, is a story that was told by a nurse of Lizzie Borden when she was an older woman before she passed away. There's a nurse of Lizzie Borden that tells a story that Lizzie told her before she passed away, that there was a boyfriend, that Lizzie had a boyfriend, and the boyfriend was the killer. And so we haven't really touched on this yet, and I know a lot of people have heard this story, but when you talk about somebody who, there was one viewer who described the person that the male came from money, the male came from a good family. The idea of the boyfriend is that this guy was from another prominent family. And he was somebody that was very active, always in motion, supposedly a guy who was a motorcycle rider. I forget what they called him, but he had a nickname that referred to, riding motorcycles, and in fact, ultimately died in a motorcycle accident. So I think that we're kind of pointing to things that lead us in a couple different directions, but you're right. Everything leads us towards the idea that there was a man involved. Who was that man? Susan,
yes,
what are your thoughts?
I think that honestly, maybe everybody was involved. I think this was premeditated. I think that if there was another man involved, I would say maybe John was the mastermind. I felt like this was very premeditated, and maybe he didn't wield the weapon, but he could have definitely hired someone who could have. And maybe he went down the rafters a little bit into like people that maybe Bridget knew, and Bridget had motives. She's like, hey, I like your plan. I'm being abused by this man. And then I think everybody, had a little bit of a motive to off these two people. And they kind of collaborated and worked together, and that's why all these stories are so clean. I think they all worked in conjunction with each other.
That would be really interesting. I also, a few viewers mentioned a kind of a love relationship between the male and female murderers, and that the male was definitely motivated by wanting to be loyal and help this female. So that would be
that sounds funny because it is interesting because there was this weird situation with Abby Borden. Normally when Uncle John came to visit, he would sleep in the attic, which is where the same quarters were of Abby. And a lot of people are, might be misconstruing the abuse, that maybe they're thinking, oh, maybe Uncle John was the one that was like abusing Abby, but maybe he slept upstairs because they had a romantic connection. He'd come down and visit with her all the time, and he learned of the abuse that maybe was happening with, Borden, Andrew Borden, and he did not like that, especially because he was formerly married to his own sister. So think of that. He's like, wow, my two nieces, my blood relative nieces, from my sister's side of the marriage, is living in a house with like a sexual abuser. And then, you have Abby Borden, who might be too meek to even like confront her husband about that abuse. So she turns a blind eye to that whole scenario, which is another reason why they offed her too, just because she just didn't have that backbone. And also because of the motive of not having the inheritance go over to the girls, So I think everybody had in on it, because even after the maid had left the property, You know, she ended up having enough money to buy herself a farm. And nobody knows how a maid, an Irish maid, goes to owning a whole ranch. And then she ends up getting married and all of that stuff. So I think that after this whole case was closed, all of that money got divvied up between everyone that was involved.
Ooh, interesting.
Wow.
That's
I
fascinating.
didn't know that about Bridget. I didn't know
I
that
didn't either.
Bridget was able to purchase a farm.
Oh,
You've really
yeah.
researched
And there's a
this,
picture
Susan.
in the room. Well, there's an actual picture of her in the room here at the B&B standing in front of her ranch.
Hmm.
Huh.
Like her in her older age as an elderly woman. So that's another thing about that I think, you know, and this goes to show, you know, if you live your life in a negative aspect and you start crossing all these people, you're going to start gaining enemies like within your own home. And all these people are probably conspiring against the Bordens this whole time because of the abuse that they're getting. And then people's emotions get involved, you know. Oh, and so the reason why Uncle John was staying in the guest room that day, which is where Abby had passed away, was because Abby had informed him that he will no longer be staying in the attic, that she wasn't going to allow it. And so she went to the room, the guest room downstairs, which was Uncle John's old apartment that had been renovated, and said, you cannot no longer stay up there near the maid's quarters. You have to stay, you know, here in the guest room. So she didn't allow him to stay in his usual space that day. So maybe she had caught an inkling of some sort of romantic tryst between the maid and Uncle John. He did not like that. And then, you know, he learned about the sexual abuse that was going on between, you know, Andrew Borden and the maid. And then they're like, look, we need... Then you had, you know, Lizzie, you know, and her perspective saying, you know what, I deserve all of this. You deserve these things too. Let's make a plan. So they hired somebody else to get involved. I don't know if Uncle John wields anything, but maybe they did hire someone and they had enough people in there. And there was also a robbery that had happened prior to this event. Where they had somebody enter the home, which with doors that are usually locked, that came in and stole Mrs. Borden's jewelry and like finer things from her closet, and they didn't steal anything else from the house. And there was evidence showing that it was just that it was somebody that knew where all this stuff was. So it shows that they had people that were with them that knew about the Bordens, like an outside element to all of this. And I think it's interesting that they show a lower class man being involved because, you know, usually an affluent family, when they want somebody offed, they're not going to do the dirty work themselves. They're going to hire an assassin.
So we are now entering into our very paranormal part of today with our first guest coming on, Jeff Belanger.
Susan, how have you been sleeping in the Lizzie Borden house?
So far, I've been sleeping pretty good, except for waking up in the middle of the night at least once or twice with like the crazy tingles and electricity running through my body.
Wow.
But other than that, I sleep pretty good.
This is one of my favorite haunts. I've been going there for years and years, gathering stories for even longer. And it's one of those places that when you travel wherever in the world and you say, oh, I'm from Massachusetts, people will invariably say, oh, do you know the Lizzie Borden house? And so it's really cool that you guys are doing this here tonight.
Right.
Inside every paranormal enthusiast is a history buff, right? Because the history is the story.
Absolutely. The history is the stage that we set this on. I've said over and over, when you skip the historical background of a location, of a haunt, it's like going to see a play and the curtains open and all the actors are dressed in black. There's no scenery, there's no set design, and they just start talking. And you have no idea what's going on. Is it 1950? Is it 2050? Is it, is it the Old West? Is it a city? You need the context. And the history is the stage that we set this on. And when you have a place like the Borden house, where the stage is set, man, that's what it looked like in 1892. When you walk inside, you just walked into 1892. And I think that plays a significant role in that haunting in particular, but in all these places. And, you know, we talked about like the Queen Mary, and we talked about these locations that still look the way they did all those years ago. I think that it plays a role in why these places are so active. Okay. When the Borden murders happened in August of 1892, of course, it's a big to-do. However, there was one reporter who had the wherewithal to kind of look back, and he said, whoa, it turns out there was a multiple murder on this property decades ago. In 1848, Andrew's uncle lived in the house next door. You can look out the window there, Susan, and see which house he lived in. Lived next door with a woman that he married that had children from a previous marriage. One day she snaps, and she drowns her 3 children in a cistern right on the property, right feet from where you're sitting right now, Susan. And then she slits her own throat. 2 of the 3 children died. 1 actually lived. Mrs. Borden died, and the 2 youngest, Holden and Eliza, age 1 and age 2, did in fact die. They are buried at the same cemetery as Lizzie and Andrew, though not that close. And you got to know what you're looking for. Those stones are very small, and there you can see Holden and Eliza, 1847 to 1848, 1846 to 1848, tragically killed. And so this reporter wrote in this article, is there some kind of black cloud hanging over this property that this has happened before and it happened again? And the strangest part is that some of the most common occurrences inside the Borden house seems to be tied to children. Now, those kids were not killed in that house. I can't stress it enough. But feet away on the same property, the adjacent building, and yet I've heard weird things in there that sound like children. On the 3rd floor, they've left that toy chest out with toys as trigger objects for the children they believe are haunting the place. And those are the only 2 kids that I'm aware of that have died anywhere close by.
What about some of your experiences, your personal experiences that you've had at this location?
Yeah, so the very first time I was there, it was like 2004, 2005. There's 4 of us.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. And there's 4 of us, and we were going all through the house, and we were down in the basement. It's about 11:30 at night, right at the bottom of the stairs. And since you've been in the house, there's a side door that leads right into the kitchen. And we were right at the bottom of those stairs, for all 4 of us, the only people in the house. And we hear these 2 sets of scampering footsteps, like from the side door into the kitchen. And we just looked at each other and went, oh no. Like we thought kids from Fall River had just broken in. We had to call the cops, whatever. So we race up those stairs. It couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 seconds between hearing the noise and being right at the top of the stairs and looking all around and thinking, okay, what do we do? And then checking that kitchen door, and it's locked just the way we left it. And then all of us looking at each other and saying, all right, well, we all heard the same thing. We all reacted the same way, and there's nobody in here. Believe me, when something weird happens around me, the first thing I want to do is explain it naturally, is to be able to say, like, okay, what could it have been? Is there this or is there that? And when you can't, when you run out of explanations, then you're left with something that's really odd. Other things that have happened over time, Leanne shared some really weird stuff with me, like strange voicemails that like the house calling some of her guests and just leaving like these weird groaning voices. And she's like, no one was on the phone. It's the middle of the night. Just freaky stuff comes out of that house again and again. Other times I've been there. Sometimes it's just a feeling. I know for me, I was in the guest room where I believe you're sleeping, by the way. Someone was murdered there, right? Just saying. Brutally murdered, not like, blow dart or something, like horribly murdered. And so I was in the room and I was alone. And I just remember feeling like, whoa, there's just like this weird buzz to it. And for me, I don't have a lot of equipment. I don't use it. I want to see something. I want to feel something for me, because I know usually I don't. I'm not psychic. I'm not sensitive. I want to just see it for myself. And sometimes you do. And that's what the Lizzie Borden house is all about. When you sit in that couch where you took a nap, where Andrew Borden took his very last nap, when you are, lying in that bed right next to where, Abby Borden met her end, you're connecting. You're in the place. You are becoming part of the story because you're there. We are still trying to solve this case. The unsolved murder still haunts us, and that keeps you up at night, especially when you're trying to sleep in that house.